Do you have messed up threads or maybe no threads at all? Do you need a thread chaser? Do you need a tap and die set? We'll find out in a moment. I'm Tim Johnson. You're watching Shop Tool Reviews. Today we're going to do a little bit of a how-to as well as explaining what's the difference between a thread chaser and a tap and die set or a rethreading kit, which I don't even like that term because that makes like that you're actually threading it and that's not what you're doing. Anyway, thread chaser slash rethreading kit or tap and die set. What's the difference? Let's get started. We'll use some examples on both of these and actually show you hands-on. Then we'll come back and talk about pricing on these two as well as some other different options as well. Let's get started. All right, so what we have in front of us is two old sets, both of them Craftsman made in the USA sets. So that tells you a little bit about the age of these. Let's not get into that. Anyway, we have a tap and die set and we have a rethreading kit, or better known as a thread cleaning kit is what I would call it, but they call it a rethreading kit. I really don't like rethreading because I think it's more of cleaning up the threads rather than actually rethreading it. Anyway, we won't debate on that topic either, but that's what we have. We have a thread cleaning kit or a thread chaser kit or rethreading kit, and we have the tap and die set. Now, there's some other variations as well, but these are just a couple of the larger sets that we have here, so wanted to talk about this. What we're going to do is we're going to show you some examples of each. So we'll actually drill and tap a hole, as well as we'll do some thread cleaning or rethreading as well, and we'll talk about the differences on when to use these things, and then even some tips and tricks on how to make things better. I would recommend whenever you're using a tap or die or a rethreader or thread cleaner that you use some type of lubrication. Sure, you can use WD-40, that's acceptable, but there's some better stuff as well. But just make sure you're using some type of lubrication because you will create some galling if you're not, especially if you're using this on different types of metal. And again, this is not the video for that, but just I recommend use some type of lube, whether it's WD-40. This is Brute Lube from Champion Cutting Tool. Love this stuff for drilling, tapping, and then just general metal work. Anytime we're cutting or threading or anything with metal, this works really, really good. But use some type of lubrication. That's definitely going to help you in having a successful either rethread or successful tap or die situation. So basically, tap and die, we're going to drill a hole or take a rod and create threads on it. So we're going to create a bolt as a fastener or create a nut as a fastener. Your tap is something, looks like this. It taps into something, and your die is this one that's actually going to rethread a rod to make it look like a bolt. In generality, that's basically a tap and die set. You're going to use these other different tools, and you probably already know these things to use the taps and the dies. The thread cleaner kit or the rethreading kit, you're going to use just a wrench or a socket to turn these in, and basically all these are going to do is clean up the threads that are already there, either on a stud or a bolt, and that's when you'll use this type that looks like a nut, and or in a hole or an existing hole that's already threaded. You're going to use this type here. This has metric and SAE. This kit, this tap and die kit, is only SAE. That's not the metric, but this one is a nice little small kit that includes the SAE and the metric and several different thread sizes as well. And then we also get into a thread file as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. When do you use a thread file? You may look at this and go, what in the world? But we're going to explain this in detail here very shortly. Okay, so we know this is our tap and die kit. Pretty standard taps and dies. Just wanted to cover something really quick. So here's your standard straight tap, if you will, and basically it takes several threads for this to taper up, and that's because we'll have a hole that's about the size of the end of this, and then it starts cutting very lightly, and it takes 6 or 7 threads till it actually gets to the correct size of what you're cutting for that bolt. So whether that's a 3/8 or 5/16 or whatever this is, looks like National Course, it takes several threads to do it. If we had a bottom tap, This would have less of a rake right here, or less of a slope, and it would start its full transition in like 2 or 3 threads. You would be to the full size already. So there's a few different variations on taps, not just a tap like you see here. And then even in this kit, this is a tapered tap, and you can actually see it with your visible eye that the whole way up, these threads taper. Now, you'll notice those in some of your old intake manifolds had some tapered threaded plugs. A lot of your blocks will have taper threaded plugs. So when you're tapping one of these, make sure you don't want to run this thing all the way in, because then you're going to maximize the size of the threads. You want to get it in until it's engaging all the threads, and then pretty much back it out and be done. You don't want to take the full size of this this tapered tap. But both of these right here are tapered taps. They're not just straight. Again, another time to really dig into that in detail. Now there's some other taps and kits as well, like this one here, like when we're running a tap. So basically we're starting with a clean hole and we're putting threads in it. Well, if we're doing that, we have to drill a hole. Well, you need to look and see what size drill do I need for this tap. And there's some, cheater cards out there. In fact, on the lid of this kit, it actually tells us what size drill bit we need for each one of these taps. If not, you can jump on the old interweb and that'll tell you as well. But we do have to drill a hole, so you need drill bits for each one of these sizes. To be able to tap a hole, you need to have the hole drilled first, and it needs to be smaller than what the tap size is. Well, you can also get kits to wear like this. Again, nice kit from Champion Cutting Tool, to where it has the corresponding drill bit with the tap. So there's no thoughts about this. If we're going to be using this tap here, then we know that we need this drill bit. So they're paired, each one of them, with the correct drill bit to be able to drill the hole, and then you can tap it, and there's no thoughts or questioning about that. So that's really nice to have as well, where you can get a kit that has the corresponding drill bit with it. And then there's even some taps now that will work with your impact wrench or impact driver. So these are from Speed Taps, and these are specifically made that you can put a socket on it, and you can use your impact driver or your drill, your impact wrench, and be able to run these threads in. I will say the thicker the metal, you got to be more careful, but it is possible to use those without any issues. And then you can even get into where you get a tap with the drill bit made onto it. So you see the front half of this is a drill bit. The last half of it is the actual tap. And so you can drill this in and drill it in. And once you start to get through the hole, you want to slow up so you're not just shoving it in there, and then it will actually tap out the hole as well. So those are very handy to use. Again, on thicker metal, you have to be more careful. Okay, so we've got some angle set up here in the vise here, but it's not just regular old angle. This is 400 thousandths thick, so that is more than 3/8 of an inch thick. So 3/8 of an inch would be what, 0375? Yeah, 250. Yeah, 0375 would be 3/8. This is thicker than 3/8. And we're going to drill and tap these holes. Now you will see that I did go ahead and pilot drill these. They say you don't necessarily have to do that, but I like to do it, just make it quicker and easier. So anyway, I've got 5 pilot holes drilled. We might not use all those, but anyway, in this 3/8 inch thick, or 3/8 plus inch thick steel. Now we're going to choose the 3/8-16 tap. That means it's 3/8 of an inch in diameter and 16 threads per inch. So 3/8-16. Now we need to find out what size drill bit we need to use with that. So if we look on our lid, our little cheat sheet here, we can see right here on our lid for the 3/8 by 16 inch National Course tap, we know we need a 5/16 inch drill bit. So we can go to our drill index, we can pull out our 5/16 inch drill bit, and now we can drill the hole, and we can see that that drill bit is smaller than the tap. You definitely want to make sure that your drill bit is smaller than the tap. Okay, so we've got our 5/16 inch drill bit chucked up in our drill. Even though we have a pilot hole, I want a little bit of lube on there. And then we want to drill this nice and slow. And I'm going to go ahead and do another hole, drill another hole here. Yeah, I always like to clean up my area as I go so I don't have a filthy area I'm working with. Okay, we've got our tap. Well, we need a tap handle. Now, for smaller taps, you can use one like this. It's kind of got a sliding T-handle on here, and that works out absolutely fine for smaller stuff. But once you get into the larger stuff, as long as you have room, you can get one of these here, and you see it. You just unscrew this to set the size and put it on here. And by the way, you can also get tap sockets that actually fit these different size taps with a socket so that you can use a socket and ratchet. But I like to use like the T-handles because it allows you to keep this balanced, and that's very important when you start tapping a hole. Okay, so we've got our drilled holes. Now we need to tap it. So we've got our tap in our T-handle. And by the way, you want to make sure that your T-handle is going to clear everywhere. If not, you may want to go get something with a smaller base to it. Anyway, I'm going to put a little bit of lube on our tap here. I don't have to put a whole lot, but something definitely to get us started here. And there's definitely some tricks to doing this the correct way. Okay, make sure that you've definitely got it perpendicular to the surface. And then it's going to you want to put a little bit of forward pressure on it as you're cutting to get that started and get it, make sure it's started the first couple of turns. And once you know it's engaged, what these are made to do is you'll feel it getting harder and harder, and you'll break that tap if you keep twisting it in there. So once you get it in a few turns, back it up, you'll literally feel it break off. There, it freed up, and it's literally broke those bits off. And now I can go forward again, a couple of turns, then I want to back up. And you'll hear it and feel it as you're going. Free it up. Back up. So as you're cutting those threads, those metal filings are getting caught in the flutes of this tap. And so it's very important that you back it up, and that breaks those off. Now, there's some machine taps that are made to just continue to cut, but typical hand taps like this, it works best if you'll give it a couple of turns and then back it up to break those bits off. And then you can feel once you get all the way through that you're good now. So now I can show you right here in the tap, you see all those bits caught in the flutes of this tap. And that's what we were doing. As we were going and backing it up, it was breaking those off and dropping them here in these reliefs or in the flutes so that it will eject those and they won't get caught in our threads. Now afterwards, I would definitely take, I like to take compressed air and blow these out. Blow these flutes out, also blow the hole out. Now we got a 3/8 bolt. Threads all the way in by hand, and it's not loose either. And there's a hole that obviously we haven't tapped yet. And obviously that bolt won't fit in there. But in the 3/8, it's good to go. So there's a standard tap, easy enough. Now we're going to take another one of these drilled holes that we haven't tapped yet, and I'm going to run through an M10 or a metric size 10 millimeter tap. And this is one from Speed Taps that's ready to use with your impact or an impact driver with a socket on it. So I'm going to use an impact wrench, 3/8 impact wrench with a socket on it to drive this in. This is a 10 millimeter, very close in drill size. I think I'm one drill bit off. I still should be okay. Here's a 10 millimeter bolt, which is very close to a 3/8, but you can see it does not thread in. I can just get it started, and when we get this one drilled and tapped, you'll notice that this 3/8 bolt will go into it, but it will be very sloppy. And I'll show you that here in one moment. So something you need to be careful with, but this is an M10 or a metric tap. Again, a little lube here. And now this one's should be good to just power all the way through, but I'll still back it up a little bit and kind of clean it up after I'm in a little bit. So you definitely can just power that all the way through and it will probably last you a little bit. But if you'll take care of them, like I just did, kind of let it cut a little bit, back it out, let it cut a little more and back it out, they'll last a whole bunch longer. Whole lot longer, not bunch, whole lot longer. So same thing, we want to clean the flutes and the threads off of our tap. Clean the hole. Now, as I mentioned, 10mm bolt. Threads in there nice and snug, but still nice and clean, and threads all the way in. And now let me show you the 3/8. This 3/8 16 is close enough that it will thread into this hole, but you see it's all wobbly and loose. And once you get in about 6 or 7 threads, then it starts getting tough because that's when the threads per inch just don't line up to the metric. But be careful with that, especially when you're dealing with like this. This is a hardened fastener. That's a grade 8 bolt. I could really mess up those threads in that M10, but they are very close to a 3/8. So always know whether you're dealing with a metric fastener or metric hole and a standard or SAE. And you see that the 10mm will definitely not start here. Run that in. Okay, now we get to the thread cleaners or the rethreading kit, and we'll use these on a few things here. Now we've got a cylinder head here. This is an aluminum cylinder head, an LS style GM cylinder head, but pretty much all cylinder heads, have the same kind of configuration as far as you have exhaust manifold, intake manifold, accessory brackets and everything hanging off the cylinder head, as well as even spark plug holes. And when you disassemble or work on an engine, I feel like every hole needs to be chased with a thread chaser or with a thread cleaner. Why is that? Well, I just think if you've got something off, you've got a big potential of galling threads, you've got a big potential of dirt getting in there. So I would just rather have a rethreader or a thread chaser go in there, go in and out, or clean those threads up, and then you're ready for that whatever else to do. Whether it's the exhaust manifold, intake manifold, even rocker arm covers to go back on, and we know those holes are going to be nice and clean. I also like to run all the bolts through a chaser as well, just to clean those threads. Now, why don't we want to use a tap in there? Well, if we used a tap in there and we started getting off center or crooked, it would recut threads. And so you would have basically a couple of different thread paths in there, and you would pretty much ruin the cylinder head or have to drill it, put a Healy coil on it, and again, something for a new video. So like in this case on these bolts here for the exhaust manifold, that's going to be an M8. So I could take my M8 thread chaser or thread cleaner, and I could spin that in there, and I want to go as far in as I want to. But first, just like I was saying with the tap, I want to go in, put a little lube. Again, definitely with this, you could use WD-40, but anything's better than nothing. And I could run that all the way in, and you could use a ratchet with this. I like to use a ratcheting wrench. I've got better control, and I can feel when it gets tough, and I may want to back it back out. And I just want to have that feel of how much feedback it's giving me to make sure I'm not running into something where I'm going to strip some threads or ruin some threads or just see if there's any obstructions whatsoever. So even though this was a pretty clean hole, I could almost run that all the way in with my fingers. I'm sure that I'll still pull some stuff out of there that gets caught in those flutes. Yeah, there's a lot of dirt in there that it's pulling out. And just like with my tap, I want to take some compressed air, clean that up, and now I can chase another hole. And I can run that all the way in until it bottoms out, and I just want to be gentle, and then I can pull that back out. Now those were very clean, even though, like I said, we're still probably pulling some stuff out of here. So I've got a little bit of junk I'm pulling out of there, but those all had bolts in them, so they should remain pretty clean. Now let's check out something that's going to be a lot worse. So now we're staring at the end of the cylinder head, and this is where your accessories bolt on. However, on a V8 configuration, and especially on a GM, but most others are like this too, these heads are not directional heads. In other words, there's not a left or a right. The left will work on the right, they'll swap around, which means the ends are pretty much identical. So this was probably one that was toward the firewall of the vehicle. A lot of dirt here, nothing was ever bolted to it, so these bolt holes have never had bolts in them, and therefore it gets crudted with oil probably first, and then dirt. Like this hole right here is just caked with dirt. Well, if I put this head on in a configuration where this was to the front and I didn't clean these up, I'm going to have a heck of a time getting bolts in these holes, and this is where a thread chaser is going to work out excellent. Now, the first thing in this situation is I want to blow out this hole. So that's going to generally clean that up a little bit, at least get any loose, heavy debris out of there. And then it should be in M10 1.25, I believe. Which, be careful, because the M10, they have 3 different sizes. This is a 1.5, there's a 1.25, and I think there is also a 10 1.0. So there's a 1.0, 1.25, and 1.5. On this, it's an M10 1.5. So here we see we've got a nice, clean thread chaser. Little lube on here. Make sure you get that started with your fingers for sure. Now we can see junk already coming out of here, and we can see this thing is loaded up with all types of just filth in these valleys or in these flutes, whatever you want to call these. So the threads are probably full. And so I would take this, clean this out really good, probably shoot some brake cleaner on it. And I would probably chase this one more time just to make sure we've got all the junk out of it. But this is where a thread chaser is just going to come out so beneficial when you go to put a job back together. And when you get set up, I mean, you could take a little impact driver and be very careful once you got a few threads started, run these in and out, and have all these threads chased within a few minutes. And it just makes such a nicer job. It's going to make your job a whole lot easier. And then here's another M10 bolt. And now it threads right in. Where before, like this one here that has not been chased, there, that's as far in as I can go by hand. It's 3 or 4 threads at the most. More junk out of there. And now I can take that same hole that was a pain, and now I can thread this all the way in as far as I want to by hand. And now finally, let's talk about the thread chasers for the bolts, which looks like a nut, and also when to use a thread file and how to use that. So let's quickly do that. Okay, here's our same M10 bolt, M10 by 1.5 bolt, and you can see this thing is nice and clean. I mean, I can easily thread this nut all the way in and all the way off. Well, let's change that. So now I've got a couple of spots on there, as you can see, where the threads have definitely laid over. In fact, I could probably try to force that nut, and with just maybe a couple of places on there, it may clean that up. Good chance, though, it would ruin the nut along with trying to clean that up, if it even did that, but it definitely caused some issues. So how do we clean that up? Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. With a bolt like this, it would be easy to just thread on this thread chaser here, which again looks like a nut. Put it in my vise here. And again, a little lube is never going to hurt us. Again, use a ratchet if you want to. I like to use a ratchet wrench. And let's find our imperfection. There's one right there. So it must already be trying to clean one up. The one is right there. And I cannot turn this by hand. I can start to back it up a little bit, but I can't turn it forward. Okay, so now you can see that we really don't see any imperfections anymore in those threads. And now I can thread this off by hand. And now I can also spin this nut off by hand. So the thread chasers like this going to work great on your bolts and studs as well. Now keep in mind, when you're using a die to cut new threads, on a die it has a side that it says start this side. So that means it's tapered just like on our tap, and so you want to start it on this side when you start it. So make sure you look at that when you go to use a die and cutting threads. In this case, we're not cutting new threads, we were just cleaning those up. So again, clean them up very nice so that we can now spin that on and off by hand. And one last thing, these work really good either on sizes that you may not have large enough for the bolts that you have, or in situations where it just may not work well. And so again, let me take and really lay those over. So now we see we got the beginning of these threads messed up. So that's going to make it really tough to get a thread chaser started, because you'll have to start it on those laid over threads. So this is a great spot to where, let me lay this in the vise here. See where we can see our threads. There we go. And then I need to know the pitch of these threads. As I mentioned, it was a 10 by 1.5. So I can grab my thread file here, which by the way, these plastic handles just come off. And so I get 8 different sides. So I get 4 on this side and 4 on this side, and the same over here. Except this is for SAE and this is for metric, and there's my 1.5. And if I find some clean threads, so there's my 1.5, I can put my handle on this end, find some clean threads, and you should be able to confirm that it kind of rides on those threads perfectly. This is how you'll use it, like this. So it should kind of embed itself in those clean threads without any issue and confirm that that's the right size. And so now I can let it basically ride on the good threads and push forward and cut. And so just like on any other file, just kind of work at it. If you'll work from the good to the bad, it'll kind of ride easy for you. And you can go in both directions, but there's a chance you could mess things up. But if you're real careful, you can do that. And again, let the existing or good threads kind of guide you. So don't try to bite it all at once. Work little by little from good to bad, and you won't mess things up. Looks like we got some damage on this side too from where I hit it against the vise. So let's dress that really quick. And there we go. So that's what a thread file will do for you. They will save you big time when you need them. So understand how they work, use them a few times, and you'll really understand how to work them, and they're pretty easy to use. Hopefully we were able to explain a little in detail with some good close-up shots of what's going on when we need a rethreader or a thread chaser, and what's going on when we use a tap and die, or tap or die set. Now these sets are readily available. Now I really love these Made in the USA sets, but you can't find a Made in the USA Craftsman set of thread chasers nor tap and die sets. Now an equivalent value of these sets, say off of Amazon, is going to run you probably about $150 for a tap and die set. That's kind of minimal too. If you want a full set like this, and this doesn't even include metric, so you're going to pay a little bit when you're going to a tap and die set. This is hardened machine steel, and so they are not cheap to make. But anyway, so you're looking at $150 and up. We'll have a few different links to some different kits in the description, so check that out. And when you look at thread chasers, you're probably going to be somewhere between $75 and $150 on that too, depending on what size kit you get, and again, of how nice of a kit that you get as well. I will tell you, these thread chasers we use all the time. You don't even have to use it when threads are bad. Cleaning things up, like I said, anytime we take something down, especially if an engine gets tore down, every single bolt hole is going to get cleaned, and have a thread chaser run through it, and every bolt cleaned as well, just because it makes it so much nicer. When you put it back together, there's nothing catching, there's nothing grabbing. You can thread everything in by hand for the most part, and everything's nice and clean. There's no obstructions in there. So when you go to torque something, it's not grabbing on the threads and giving you a false reading, and you're actually getting bolt stretch, which is what you're supposed to get when you're either torquing a bolt or torque to yield, where you're adding angle. Anyway, that's hopefully helped you out. Hey, let us know in the description if you hated this. Also, let us know if we did okay. And would you hit that thumbs up, and even hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And by all means, as I mentioned, if you hated our video, then give us a thumbs down and let us know in the description why. Keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Have a great day and keep smiling.